Hello GeoTracers! This video gives a brief tour of the major functions of the DOoR portal. The DOoR portal is the system that all PIs must use to register datasets for inclusion in IDP 2021 and subsequent IDPs. The central concept of the registration process is to create a barcode that uniquely identifies a cruise PI and parameter combination. The barcodes are then used to track your dataset through data submission, intercalibration, permission giving, assembly, and association with publications for the creation of the next IDP. The DOoR portal is accessed at this URL up here. You will come to this welcome page, and in order to access the DOoR, you need to log in using an ORCID ID. Note that this process needs to be completed by the PI. The reason is that one of the key steps in the registration process or in the entire process is to provide permission, and only the PI can provide permission to release data. So in the registration, to get into the DOoR, I've signed in with my ORCID ID, and it will ask me to confirm my email and affiliation. I'll press OK. And now I'll be brought to this main menu. And this main menu allows me to access all of the functionalities of DOoR. So I'll go through each of these steps briefly, one by one. So let's start here. Step 1, registering the datasets. GeoTrace's data products are organized first by cruise and then by parameter. And so in order to start with the registration process, I have to select a cruise. I can either scroll through all of the known sections and process cruises here and look for the one that is mine and click on it. Or if I can't find it, but I know some of the aliases or the section ID, I can type in, for example, the section ID. I'm actually going to type in GAO2, that was the Western North Atlantic cruise, and we see that there's 3 legs here. Now, we have to register datasets separately for each leg. There is an easy way to register all the parameters for one leg and then to transfer it to the other legs. So I'm going to choose the 3rd leg of GAO2. And that will now allow me to enter in my parameters. If it's compliant data, I could click here and then I would be prompted to ask to enter the cruise ID for the compliant cruise. Or if you really can't find your cruise after looking and looking and looking, you could click here and that will send an email to the GDAC. Okay, now that we've selected a cruise, so this is GAO2, this is the 3rd leg, so the cruise ID is JC057. We scroll down and our next step is to select the parameters that we measured. Now there's 2 ways to select parameters that we measured. We can either use the parameter search tool or we could switch to the parameter tree exploration tool. So what's selected is up here and then you click here to switch back and forth between the 2 tools. You can switch them back and forth between the 2 tools seamlessly. The GeoTrace's parameters have a very specific naming system, and these tools are designed to help you select the correct name. The important thing to know is that all the parameters are grouped according to one of 8 domains. So aerosols, biogeotraces, dissolved TEIs, hydrography and biogeochemistry, ligands, particulate TEIs, polar, and precipitation. So I'm going to select dissolved TEIs. And once I select a domain, then all of the possible elements and compounds that are in that domain are then populated in this list. So as I said, there's a very specific naming system, and each parameter name has up to 6 tokens, and the 6 possible tokens are listed here. So obviously you have to select the element, and I'm going to select iron. And then once you've selected an element, all the possible tokens that may be associated with that element are then populated here. Iron has one of the most greatest number of types of species that are measured, and so all of the tokens are populated, but that won't be the case for every element. So for example, I can choose an oxidation state. None is just total iron. 2 would be iron 2. I could choose atomic mass, which none, the default for none is for concentration, and then if I'm doing an isotope, then the isotope ratio pair will be listed here. Phase will show me what the different possible phases are, and then data type will be filled in automatically depending on what I put in for the atomic mass. And then sampling system allows me to select the sampling system in which the sample was collected. So I'm going to do, for this case, I'm going to do, let's say, an iron isotope. Now note that the data type is currently conc, but if I select the isotope, it now changes to delta to indicate that it is an isotopic composition in the delta notation. And I will choose the correct sampling system. So in this case, I will choose a bottle because that is how my sample was collected. For most of you who will be doing dissolved trace metals, this will be a very common selection, but there are times when you might select fish or a boat pump, depending on how you collect the samples. And these different drop-downs will populate depending on what it is that you select. So it won't always look the same. Okay, so now that I've selected all of my tokens, I'm going to click this plus, and then what it's going to do is that it's going to add now this correct parameter name down to this list of selected parameters. Since I already have iron here, I'm going to also select just the concentration, and because I also measure the concentration, I may also, let's say, measure colloidal iron or soluble iron, so I'll do that. I will also say that I'm measuring dissolved iron collected from the fish. So that was all from bottle, and here's now from the fish, and I will also add that. So if I only wanted to register these 4 parameters, I could click OK, and barcodes would be generated for those 4. But I also want to use this opportunity to show you this other way of selecting parameters, the parameter tree exploration tool. So I'll click on that. And this is maybe more efficient for those of you who have figured out the grouping and parameter naming scheme. So you see all the 8 domains listed here, and then I can click on dissolve trace elements. And if I click on that plus, then all of the potential sampling systems for all potential parameters in dissolved TEIs are listed. I'm going to click bottle. And now once I clicked bottle, all of the parameter types that are grouped, that are sort of like parameters, are grouped together. So I could have ligands together, radionuclides, lead isotopes, etc. I'm going to choose just this one, which is trace elements, and I'll click on that. And now, once I've expanded that, then the entire list of every single parameter that is a dissolved or total dissolvable trace element collected by a bottle is now listed. And there's a lot of them. But if I know that I've actually analyzed a lot of them, I can just go through and click them. And note that once I click them, it will be automatically transferred to the selected parameters window. So I collected dissolved aluminum. I'm going to scroll down and click dissolved cadmium. You see that shows up right away. I will do dissolved cobalt, dissolved copper. Actually, that's total, so actually I'll do dissolved copper. You see that iron is already selected because I selected it using the parameter search tool. And maybe that's good. Maybe I'll click on that and I'll realize, oh, wait a minute, I don't actually measure dissolved gallium, so I can trash it. If you put something in there, you could trash it now, and there's also a step later on where you can trash something that you've registered by mistake. So let's say this is now all of the parameters that I want to register at this point, and I'll click OK. Once I click OK, this pop-up will show up. It's asking me to confirm that this is indeed the correct cruise that I want to be registering for, and these are all the parameter names for the parameters I want to register. If this is incorrect, I could click cancel and go fix it, or I can go back and click confirm. Once I click confirm, you see that the parameters in that green-headed parameter list window went away one by one. That was the creation of the barcode for each of those parameters. Once this pop-up shows up, that means that each one of those parameters has been assigned a barcode, and it's been registered, and it has been saved. So it is now in the system. At this point, we can take one of 3 steps. We could stay on the step. So if I wanted to, for example, register the same parameters but for a different cruise, so for example, for leg 1 or 2 of the same cruise, since this was a 3-legged cruise, then I would click on this, and I would just then click on one of these other legs, and then also click OK. The other options were to clear the list and start over with a different cruise, or to just go back to the main menu. So I'm going to go back to the main menu. I'm not going to register anymore at this point. So that was now register data sets. Step 2 is to indicate associated scientists. This is an important step in which we give credit to all of the people who worked really hard to generate these data. And this could be your co-PIs who, if they are also associated with the exact same data sets, your postdocs, your students, your technicians. So the way you would do that is you would click on this button, you would add a scientist, and you would enter in their ORCID IDs here. If you don't know their ORCIDs, that's okay. You can just cancel and come back to this another time, go and gather their ORCIDs, and then enter them in here. And there's also an option to copy the same scientist for a bunch of different parameters at once. So once I have added associated scientists, I will go to the next step, and this is step 3. This is a really important step. Okay, so this is the step in which now we have registered our data sets, we've generated the barcodes. Now we will generate the standards and intercalibration report template that has the appropriate barcodes listed on top so that we can correctly associate the intercalibration process with the actual data set. And it is also where we download the data submission template. So let's go one by one. Again, first we have to select a cruise for which we want to register, we want to download these templates. So I think this is the one. This was like 3 of GA02, and in fact that is indeed what it is. And then what will be listed here are all of the registered parameters for that cruise. What I can do now, so this first set of lists allows me to select the parameters for which I want to submit an intercalibration report. I could download individual reports for each individual parameter if I want to submit a separate report for each parameter. But you may want to group reports because perhaps your methodology is actually quite the same, and you'll be intercalibrating with the same sort of groups of people. And so what I'll do is maybe I'll group all of the trace elements together for which I have the same methods, and I'll be intercalibrating with the same people. Maybe I'll do soluble iron separately because that's a different method. Fish I'll actually add. Aluminum is a different method. I'll do that separately. Iron isotopes is a different method. Maybe I'll do that separately, but I can group these together. So then I could download maybe these templates separately and this template separately, but this template will group all of these together. So let me do that. I'll download it and I'll open the intercalibration report. So now what you see is the cruise ID at the top, my name, my affiliation, and the parameters to be intercalibrated. And this may be the first time that you see that full data string that will be used to track your data throughout the entire process. So this part is the GeoTrace's parameter name. There's 2 colons, and then there's this 6-digit barcode. That 6-digit barcode uniquely identifies the parameter, the cruise, and the PI. And the parameter name here is just so that it is human readable and we can see what it is. So this particular intercalibration report is for these 5 parameters, and down below then are all the questions that the Standards and Intercalibration Committee would like you to answer in order to intercalibrate your data. This, of course, will take some time to fill out. So at this point in the data portal engagement process, you just want to download this template and you will fill this out offline. Okay, let's go back to the portal. That this pop-up shows up once I've downloaded the intercalibration report template. I could go back and download some other templates, but for now I'm going to close it. I will want to download these other intercalibration templates. I won't do that now. And now I'll go to the next part of this step 3, which is very important, which is generating the data template. So this allows me to choose whether I want to download a data template in a comma separated value file form or in Excel form. I will download the Excel form. It is slightly more user-friendly because there is shading in the cells to sort of prompt you for what it is that you can change and what it is that you need to add. So I'll download the XLS. I will open that. Okay, so let me just resize these columns so I could see them better. This darkish yellow just gives in the sort of metadata of who I am. So that's me, that's my ORCID ID, this is the cruise ID that I'm submitting data for, this is the section ID. These bright yellow cells are the headers for the sample metadata. So these are the metadata that uniquely identify your sample, so station, start date, start time, latitude, longitude, event ID, sample depth. You may not have to fill in every single one of these columns. You just need to fill in as many columns as will uniquely identify your sample. Also, please fill in some of the metadata that is consistent with your cruise report, because some of you may keep your own notes, but we want the entire cruise to be consistent. So you would fill in your sample metadata under these bright yellow columns, and if you scroll over to the right, then you see these blue and green shaded columns. So the blue shaded column indicates your actual parameter and barcode. So for every single parameter that I registered, there will be 3 columns generated in this data template. The actual parameter value is what I'd enter in this column with its unit in green. The standard deviation, the uncertainty in that parameter in this blue in the second column, and then the flag in the third column. And you notice that you see the parameter name, full parameter name, the 2 colons, and that barcode. And that is across all 3 columns, and this one additionally has that standard deviation flag, and this additionally has that flag. We recommend 1 standard deviation. We recommend also the C DataNet scheme. There is a link somewhere else on this page. You can change that if you'd like, but if you do, then please make a note. We also recommend these units, and you again can change that if you like, but we recommend you use these. So it's very important not to change these strings that uniquely identify your parameter with the barcode, because those are the ones that we will use to follow the data submission, the intercalibration, the assembly process. So you use this template in order to fill in. You would then put in all of your data here, and you would then email it to your data center. If you're from the US or French or Dutch or Chinese, you would submit it to your national data center. If you're anyone else, you submit it to GDAC at BODC. And that you do offline outside of DOoR by email to your data center. But the template is generated within DOoR. Okay, let's go back to DOoR now. I've done this a few times. Okay, so now we've downloaded the data template, and just to recap, in this step, we're downloading the intercalibration template, which we will fill out offline, and then we download the data submission template, which we will also fill out offline. Let's go back to the main menu now. After doing step 3, after you've generated the intercalibration report and the data submission template, that may be a good place to end, or at least to stop temporarily for many of you who will be engaging with DOoR for the first time. At that point, you will have registered your data set, indicated your associated scientists if you know their ORCIDs, and generated these reports. It will take some time to intercalibrate and to fill in your data submission, so this is a good stopping point. Let's say, though, that we have done all of that. We have done the intercalibration, we have filled out our report, and we have submitted our data to our data center. We do use DOoR to upload the intercalibration report. So just again to recap, the data submission goes by email to your data center. The intercalibration report does get uploaded through the DOoR. So let's go to step 4. We're ready to upload our intercalibration report. Again, we select the cruise. This is the cruise I will select. That's GA02 leg 3, just to make sure that that's the right one. And all of the parameters that I have registered for that cruise are listed here. And what I need to do now is select the parameters that I have grouped together into the report that I want to upload right now. And as you may recall, I selected the dissolved concentrations of the trace metals to group into one report. I kept the soluble separate, I kept aluminum separate, and I kept the isotope values separate. So I've grouped these together. Those are now the ones that I will upload. I will click on this particular icon in order to search for my intercalibration report. There it is. I will open that, lists it here. I will click upload. And now this pop-up shows me that my intercalibration report has been successfully uploaded. This also notifies the Standards and Intercalibration Committee that my report has been uploaded, so now they know to look at it and to evaluate my report. They may contact me offline to ask me for clarifications. They may ask me to submit a revised report, and that would happen in a later step in the List My Datasets page if they ask for a revised report. Okay, so I will now close. I can upload another report. So I still haven't uploaded the reports for these elements, so I can do that if I wanted to. But for now, I will go back to the main menu, and I will go to the next step, which is to give my permission to use the data in the IDP. So this is an extremely important step. We will not release your data unless you give us permission to do so. You could register your data, go through the intercalibration process, but if you do not give us permission, we will still not release your data. So everything that I have registered for which I have not given permission yet goes by default into this list, which is called uncategorized datasets. In order for me to give permission, I would click on them. Maybe I'll click all of them. Let's say I want to click all and give permission to all of them to release into the IDP. So I've now selected them all. I can either give permission or refuse. So I will give permission. And what you see now is that they've disappeared from this uncategorized dataset category. And if I click on authorized dataset, they've now all appeared here. I may decide that, oh, in fact, I don't want to release my isotope data. So I will now remove authorization. And that will now show up here. And I can change that at any time up until the release of the data product. If I decide now that, oh, in fact, I like my isotope data now, it's intercalibrated, I want to share it with the world, I can now go back and move it back to the authorized dataset part. So just to let you know that the GeoTraces IDP 2021 will be governed by the Fair Use Agreement. That Fair Use Agreement is, the text of that is on the GeoTraces website. Okay, so now we will go back to the main menu. We've given the permission. The next step is to provide publication information. So if you have publications already with a publication DOI for any of the parameters that you have agreed to release for the IDP, you can enter the DOI here, and the IDP will dynamically link your data to the publication. So we click Add DOI, and we would put in the DOI number here. Note that we don't want it as a URL link, so don't put that HTTPS in it, just put it as the actual DOI number. If you don't have a publication, that's fine. You can always come back to this at any time and enter in the publication to associate with your data. Okay, so now I will go back to the main menu. We're almost done. There's two more options listed here, List My Datasets and Update Your Email or Affiliation. The Update Your Email or Affiliation is pretty self-explanatory. I won't go through that, but I do want to go through List My Datasets. So this is the way for us to keep track, for any of you to keep track of what it is that you've done. This lists every single data set that you've registered. The cruise is here, the actual parameter name with its full string of full parameter name and its barcode are listed in this column. I have not put in my associated scientists yet. If I had, then they would be listed here. So this is a prompt for me to remember to go back and list the associated scientists with these data. So by student, my postdocs, the people who did all the work. This shows me which parameters I've submitted an intercalibration report for. If the Standards and Intercalibration Committee has deemed it intercalibrated, they will enter in a tick mark in this column. If I've given permission, this shows as a thumbs up sign. If I refuse permission, it will be a thumbs down sign. If I've provided DOI information, it shows up as a tick form here. I have to scroll to the right because my screen is too small. This GDAC status shows me that whether the data have been received by GDAC for that final assembly. Once it has, then this would show up as a tick. And then finally, there's this actions column. The red trash can allows me to delete a parameter that I registered by mistake. So I could say, oh, you know what? I didn't mean to register aluminum, dissolved aluminum, so I'm going to kill that. It will ask me to confirm, and now aluminum is gone. So if you've registered something by mistake or you chose the wrong tokens, you can delete it here and try again. Another thing you can do is, you cannot delete a parameter for which you have already submitted an intercalibration report. Presumably, if you've gone through the trouble of intercalibration, you did not register it by mistake. But for those parameters for which you have submitted in your calibration report, you can upload a new version of the report by clicking on this icon, or you could download the report that you've already submitted to see what it is that you've submitted. Okay, let's go back to the main menu. And that's it. Hopefully this has been a useful introduction to the new GeoTraces DOoR data portal. A comprehensive PowerPoint guide is also available on the geotraces.org website, and we will hold in-person help sessions at various upcoming meetings and workshops, including the 2020 Ocean Sciences meeting in San Diego. Happy geotracing!